He walked in just like anyone else, head down, hoodie up, minding his own business. Just another guy strolling through the mall, maybe looking to grab a coffee or window shop a bit. But from the moment he stepped through those glass doors, eyes followed him. Security guards started whispering into their radios, and before he could even make it to the food court, two of them approached and asked him to leave. No reason, no explanation, just leave. They didn't know who he was. They didn't recognize him, not as the quiet, soft-spoken man who'd grown up just a few miles away, and definitely not as the multimillionaire entrepreneur he had become. Maybe it was the way he dressed. Maybe it was the way he looked. But that day, they judged him without asking a single question. And what happened next? It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. But it was unforgettable. Because instead of making a scene, he made a decision. A bold one. One that would change everything for the guards, for the mall, and for everyone who had ever been underestimated. This is the story of how one man turned a moment of rejection into something so much bigger. A story about quiet power, unexpected twists, and how sometimes the best response is ownership. But what pushed him to take it that far? What happened after the papers were signed? And how did the mall staff react when they found out who really owned the place? You're about to find out. He didn't always have money. In fact, just a few years earlier, he couldn't have imagined owning anything close to a mall. Back then, he was hustling every single day, sleeping on his cousin's couch, working double shifts, and building his business from scratch out of a beat-up laptop. The kind of grind nobody really sees unless they're living it. Late nights, missed meals, rejection after rejection, but he kept going. And slowly, one client turned into 2, then 10, then 100. Success didn't come overnight, but when it did, it came quietly. He didn't flash it. No luxury cars, no chains, no loud announcements. He just moved smarter, invested wisely, and stayed low-key. And that's exactly how he walked into that mall, quiet, comfortable, invisible to the world around him. To the security guards, he looked like a problem. To himself, he was just taking a break from back-to-back meetings. But something about the way they treated him hit a nerve. It wasn't just the tone. It wasn't just being followed. It was the assumption that he didn't belong. That people like him couldn't afford to walk through those doors unless they were spending money fast or causing trouble. He didn't argue. He didn't explain himself. He just left, walked straight to his car, and made a phone call. What happened during that call? Who did he reach out to? And how did that one conversation fit the script on an entire mall? Keep watching. You won't believe what comes next. The phone call wasn't to a lawyer. It wasn't to a reporter or even a friend. It was to his real estate advisor, a quiet guy with deep connections and a talent for making big things happen fast. Within minutes, they were talking numbers. Not just square footage or rent prices, but ownership stakes, long-term development plans, and how quickly a deal could be done. You see, what most people didn't know was that the mall had been struggling. Empty storefronts, high turnover, quiet talks behind closed doors about selling. And now someone with the money, motivation, and personal reason had stepped into the picture. While that conversation was happening, back inside the mall, the security guards went back to their routine. They laughed about the guy they just escorted out. They probably thought they were doing their job. Maybe they were, but they had He kept his moves quiet. He made calls, reviewed documents, and set meetings behind the scenes. But there was more to it than business. This was personal now, and it wasn't just about him. It was about every person who's ever been looked down on, judged by their appearance, treated like they don't belong. And soon, the mall that once rejected him would become the stage for something much bigger. Weeks passed, and things inside the mall went on like normal. Shoppers came and went. Store owners kept pushing through slow sales. Security guards still watched the doors like hawks. But behind the scenes, something big was brewing. Contracts were being finalized, investors were stepping back, and whispers started floating through the mall, rumors that new ownership was coming in, that a major deal was in motion. No one knew who. No one had a name, just quiet chatter and nervous energy. The same security guards who didn't even recognize him. He wasn't escorted out, he wasn't even noticed, but he wasn't there to shop. He was there to look, really look. At the people, at the spaces, at the potential, every empty storefront, every struggling business, every person just trying to make a living. It all meant something now. His team. He walked past used stores, local vendors, updated designs, even community programs. But he kept quiet. Not a word to the public. Not yet. The security footage from that first day still sat in his inbox, untouched. And every time he looked at it, the same thought came back. Asterisk. They thought I didn't belong here, asterisk. Now, the paperwork was ready. The final signatures were scheduled. The countdown had begun, and no one, asterisk, saw what was coming next. Just days before the final papers were set to be signed, something unexpected happened. The mall's current management suddenly pulled out of the deal. No warning, no explanation, just a cold email and a voicemail that said, asterisk, we've received a counter-offer. Asterisk, at first, it didn't make sense. The property had been sitting on the market for months with barely any interest. Now, out of nowhere, a mystery buyer had come in, offering slightly more and moving fast. His team scrambled. Calls went unanswered. Meetings got cancelled. Lawyers started picking apart the contract for loopholes. And as the man watched everything stall, he couldn't help but wonder. Was this the coincidence, or was someone trying to block him on purpose? Then it got weirder. Word started spreading that one of the mall's longtime tenants had caught wind of who the buyer really was. Someone with influence. Someone with a long history there. And apparently, not everyone liked the idea of him owning the place. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was pride. But some people were trying to keep things just the way they were, even if the way they were meant keeping certain people out. Suddenly, this wasn't just about proving a point or reclaiming space. It had become a fight over power, legacy, and change. The mall wasn't just a building anymore, it was a symbol. And now he had more than just money on the line. He had his name, his story, and a community that was quietly watching what he'd do next. The day of the deal came, and the air felt different, thick with tension. His team had pushed through every obstacle, matched the mystery offer, and demanded a final meeting with the mall's board. He walked into the boardroom calm, collected and prepared. This time, no one could ignore him. He laid everything on the table, his offer, his plan to revitalize the mall, the opportunities for local businesses, the jobs it would create. But more than anything, he spoke with honesty. Not anger, not pride, just truth. About what had happened, about why it mattered. Then came the twist. The board revealed the mystery buyer. It was a former owner, someone who had lost control of the mall years ago, and was now trying to reclaim it before it changed hands. The same person who'd hired the current security team. The same person who had once said, asterisk, we need to keep a certain image here. Asterisk. That was it. The mask came off, everything made sense. But the man had one last move. He pulled out a second contract, quietly signed weeks earlier, with several key tenants who had agreed to back out of their leases if he didn't get the deal. Without them, the mall's value would drop overnight. It was a bold move, risky, but it worked. Silence filled the room. Then came the signature. He bought the mall. But just when it felt like the fight was over, a single letter arrived the next morning, anonymous, handwritten and chilling. It read, Asterisk, you may own the mall, but you'll never be welcome in it. Asterisk. He read the letter twice, then folded it up and slid it into his pocket without saying a word. He wasn't shocked. Not really. He knew that changing a place, especially one built on old ways of thinking, wasn't going to happen without pushback. But he hadn't come this far to be shaken by a few bitter words. He came to build something better. Over the next few months, the transformation began. The mall started to change, not just on the outside with new signs and fresh paint, but from within. Small businesses owned by local families moved in. Community events filled the once empty food court. Spaces that had been forgotten were turned into places for people to connect, learn, and grow. And those security guards, they were let go quietly and replaced with a team trained to protect, not profile. He didn't do interviews. He didn't post about it online. He just showed up, walked the halls, shook hands with shop owners, and made sure the people who had always been overlooked finally had a place they belonged. Some still looked at him sideways. A few never came back. But more and more, people started seeing the mall not just as a shopping center, but as a symbol of what's possible when someone refuses to let judgment define them. He never found out who wrote that letter, but it didn't matter, because every time he opened those doors and saw a kid smiling or a family gathering, he knew exactly why he was there.